Hello, I'm going to talk about the operational improvement. So the question is, how can we improve the productivity of maintenance team? We have about say 100 people working in maintenance team and sorry 150 people in the maintenance team, and we are supporting 100 products in different technologies. So each person is solving for 3 to 4 products, and essentially productivity per person is about say 2 bugs per week. So how about improving the productivity of the team uh, by uh, by 2 times? So that's the problem statement. So idea is that okay, this is a typical DMAIC problem. So we need to have a Six Sigma approach for improving the productivity. So we really need to think about okay, how are we going to measure the productivity of the team, and essentially per and also productivity per product, because if you think about okay, if you think about a product can be inherently complex. So there are like 100 products, and there are complexity related to the product or the technology being used. Also, we more difficult the problem is, idea is that okay, it is much more difficult to resolve it. So time to resolve the issue causes problems. So we really need to think about okay, what the severity per product, and essentially we need to think about from a metrics perspective, how are you going to think about the severity per product. And if you think about okay, how you are actually how the different people resolve problems. Some people are specializing in certain products or certain technologies, and then okay, some people have better skills related to problem solving. So we really need to think about okay, how are you actually thinking about collecting those metrics, both from product perspective as well as from people perspective, as well as from a customer sorry the journey of a person while they are resolving the product. So idea is that okay, each bug goes through a life cycle. So the life cycle typically is okay, you get the imagine that you are a engineer, you get the bug, not all information is already there, so you would need to reproduce the bug. You would need to think about what kind of diagnostic information is there, what kind of diagnostic information you would need to collect, and then resolve the bug. And then you would go for like regular testing, integration testing, regression testing, and essentially then deployment. So so in the life cycle, what are the timelines related to those different life cycle? And essentially, we need to collect those metrics as well. So idea is that once you collect those metrics, idea is that okay, how are we going to analyze it? If you think about a person who is or a team who is having lower productivity, several things contributes to that. Idea is that we it may be because the team is having difficulty in reproducing the problem. We may not be, the handover is not really great, or not all details are given. It is quite possible that the environments are different. Also, it is possible that diagnostic information are difficult to get. Particularly more difficult problems are that okay, the diagnostic informations are hard to come by, because they are particularly related to the time when it actually happens. Then of course, serviceability feature, if it is not there, the error messages are cryptic, then of course it will cause problems. So we need to think about those when we are actually thinking about finding out okay, how people are going to get the diagnostic information in order to solve it. The other thing, of course, which comes to my mind is that okay, how are we thinking about waste? So uh, for example, we may not have a very good regression test suite. Our maturity may not be that great. So how are we thinking about automated regression test suite. And then from a typically in a handover process, repetitions of steps are there. Can we not have synergy built? So those are the some of the ways that I can think about. Then, of course, we can think about the from a people perspective, what issues are there. So skill of a person can be both related to product or technologies. They may be related to how people solve problems. So essentially, problem-solving skills, and those can actually cause people to have lower productivity. So there might be some coaching needs which is related to product system knowledge, architecture knowledge, as well as how people are thinking about uh, 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 solving for essentially problem solving skills. So typically when a person is solving for a bug, they need to figure out how wide they are going to cast their net. So essentially what diagnostic information is there, and typically skills of the people typically comes into play, because that is how they are actually thinking about solving it. And more experienced the people are, less wide is the net. And essentially, and that relates to if they have seen these problems previously or not, and getting to know what kind of problem can cause what kind of other problems. So these are some of the things, but idea is that it all depends upon how are we going to improve. So idea is that it all depends upon what do we find, what do we find, what metrics do we collect, and what it actually points to. And then we need to find out and zero in. There might be one or several kind of issues which may be manifesting itself. So idea is that how are we thinking about improving it? So some of the improvement plans which comes to my mind is that hey, um, from a difficulty to reproduce problem perspective, what first information report on how would we actually think about giving the information. So steps to reproduce, symptom scenes, when certain things manifest itself, situations. So those are the things which need to be given in a bug. Whether or not that is being given, or can we actually think about some tools which will actually produce that first information report. Then of course, something which is related to environment, we can find out if there is environmental issues related to it. Yeah. Then possible solution for getting diagnostic information, maybe again, tool may be one of the things, but then improving serviceability features in a product goes a long way. In a short term, we can think about what those cryptic error messages really mean and where they are. So other difficult issue is that especially very hard to solve problem is because diagnostic information is not collected when they manifest itself. There are special circumstances when those manifest itself. We need to find out those solutions. Removing waste perspective is that we need to think that when we are actually handing over, are we actually duplicating our um, efforts multiple times in different teams? Can we actually remove that? Automation of regression test suite is one of the way. So we need to think about how automation can help. And of course, from a people need, that if I talked about the people need related to productivity metrics, sorry, people need related to technology, architecture, systems. So those are the things that different people are differently able. So essentially, some people are very good at certain technologies, some people may not be that great at other technologies, and whether that spread is good. So we need to think about coaching related to the skills perspective. Certain products are inherently very complex. So idea is that certain people have specialized over the years in those products. So of course they will be like more productive. So idea is that those people who are not so productive, can they be coached by people who are very productive? So that is one of the ways. Other ways are, of course, problem solving skills. So essentially, typically, people see symptoms and then they resolve. And then idea is that those how do they see symptoms and how they relate with the symptoms to the problem is something which is related to the problem solving skills. So typically, and that can be coached. So idea is that okay, how they are actually thinking about the symptoms, how they are finding out the symptoms, typical methods about okay 4W and 1H, what, when, where kind of approach, and why kind of approach to find out okay how the problems are manifesting themselves, but also like okay how you are actually coaching them to figure out okay if they are seeing everything or not, and as well as relating with that to like the product knowledge and finding out how they are actually seeing it. So that is like about improvement from a coaching perspective. So once that is done, so we can improve. So from a time scale perspective, idea is that it all depends upon the maturity. So for example, we talked about okay metrics. So from a metrics perspective, idea is that typically it will say take 2 weeks if the things are very mature, because if we are already collecting the metrics, then it's easier to like collect all the metrics and analyze it. But if it is if people are like from a process perspective, if they are not following the journey, for example, when they have when the different stages happen, they are not actually moving the bugs in those different stages religiously, then of course we will be having a wrong metrics, and which will cause us to go in a wrong direction. So we need to think about maturity of the metrics and how they are getting collected. But if we are sure about that, then idea is that we can go about collecting those metrics. Typical collecting and analyzing will take about say 2 weeks, but if you have a process issue, that will take longer. So about say 4 weeks 4 weeks time, we should be able to like okay think about like measuring and analyzing the metrics. And then of course from an improvement perspective, some of the things may be easy. So for example, FIR reports, getting tools to like get all the information may be easy, but from a people perspective, it may be it is a journey. Removing waste is a journey. So idea is that okay we will be able to I think we will be depending upon how are we actually thinking about improving. So initial bet we should be able to get it in 4 weeks. So roughly like okay roughly about say 3 months time, we will be in a good position where we will be able to have a first stage of improvement, and we will of course measure it, figuring out okay how are we going to improve, and in an iterative cycle. And idea is that over the time we will be able to achieve the goals. I do not know when we are going to improve it to like twice the productivity. It all will have different people skills perspective. We need to think about okay, think from a process perspective, data perspective to improve, and that and roughly like okay 3 months time we should be able to get to a stage where we are definitely improving quite a bit. So thank you so much.